Welcome to a very special Sabbath School class brought to you by SSU. With me today are Lauren, Tiffany, and Anastasia. My name is Marcellus, and we're going to be talking about the last days of Christ. Tiffany, would you pray for us to open?
Sure, I'll pray in Spanish. Let's pray. Padre que estás en los cielos, gracias por este día. Bendícenos con su espíritu y ayúdanos para estudiar su palabra. En el nombre de Jesús, amén.
Amen.
Amen. And Anastasia, would you read our text for us?
Sure. I'm going to be reading from Matthew 26, verse 31. Then Jesus said to them, "All of you will be made to stumble because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered."
I have no idea where to even start with Christ's last day. Obviously, we're starting at the end of the story, which is always a difficult place for me to start. But thoughts? None?
Well, I guess before the end, from the lesson, it started off with Matthew 26, 1 through 16, which went over the woman with the alabaster box.
Mary,
And,
right.
yep, Mary with the woman with the alabaster box. And so I really like that story just from the grace perspective. All of the disciples and everyone in there was like, the money could have gone towards, the poor, etc. And Christ told them, you don't know what she's doing. Basically, she's preparing me for my burial. And so it starts there with Christ being prepared for what was ahead of him in the last days. And I think that was a nice place to start in the lesson because from there, things got really, bad really fast.
Things get bad really fast.
And so I appreciate how she poured out her soul
It's
for
so
Christ.
interesting to see such a lavish use of money. You know what I mean? Such a liberal use of money. Because it's so easy to feel like spending a lot of money is a bad thing to do. And then when you really consider, though, that she's doing it for the God of the universe, you know what I mean? Like, then it's like, oh, well, that wasn't a lot of money. Honestly, you could have spent a little more, actually. But.
And I think the biggest thing is that she got that. I think she knew that
she
was
understood
doing it.
it.
For that.
And clearly, they had a
didn't.
connection.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the disciples didn't get that.
And that's what's so special about that story and about her is that she got it. She saw that this was an opportunity for her to anoint and to bless the King of the universe. And everyone was judging her and looking down on her and why was she being so wasteful when this could go to the poor and you know how many mouths this could feed and you know how much good could be done with this money. And they're missing the point. They're missing the fact that the treasure is right in front of them and that Jesus is what is most worthy of our devotion and that she had something special that no one else had, no one else got it and acted on it in a way like she did. And
this is a sidebar, but what's also interesting to me in this particular situation is Christ going, the poor will always be with you, which is such an ominous statement to me of oh, really? Really? We'll always have to deal with people having discrepancies in wages, and some being so low that we have to help them.
But
That's
I will not always be with you.
Yeah.
Jesus was there for a very short period of time. And the fact that, she had that opportunity to bless him and anoint him was a very, it's a small window in this, treasure of time that
is clearly remembered for, and doesn't he say that she would be remembered, what she did
That's
would
what
be
I was going to say. That's the most hilarious thing about this whole story is that this woman who's probably met Jesus for the first time, does this humble thing in front of everybody, and they're all sitting there basically mocking, making fun, and then Jesus said, she will be the one that will be remembered, even though y'all have been with me since the very beginning and spent time with me and know who I am. And this woman does not know who I am, and yet she goes and does this humble thing, and she will be the one that will be talked about throughout time. It's kind of like they didn't get it. And Jesus even mentions that she's preparing his body for death. He says it, and they don't even get it.
They don't register it at all.
They don't register it. They're still stuck on, what is she doing?
And how often do we go through the motions of, thinking that we have a walk with God or that we know God because, we know so much more than someone else. because, we've had this relationship that's developed over time, and someone else just comes in and they are doing it all wrong, and they don't know, what God really needs, or, and so we cast that judgment on, and we're missing the picture when, someone else it may click for them in an instant in a way that someone who's been with God for a long time may not see.
Not see all of it. Well, let's look at all of it. Let's keep going through the picture. What's the next thing that happens? Gethsemane, do we go to Gethsemane from here?
We go to the Passover from here.
The Passover.
So the new
Passover.
covenant.
Yes, yeah, I'm jumping over stuff.
It's all right. And that's in Matthew 26, 17 through 19. And there it says, "Now on the first day of the feast of the unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying to him, 'Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?' And he said, 'Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" And something that this brings out in terms of the new covenant, the disciples and the people at that time were going into this Passover as a remembrance of deliverance from Egypt. And Christ was going into it as a deliverance from sin, a redemptive work. And I don't think they saw that at that time either, but that is the picture that the new covenant that he wanted to establish.
So they're right in the middle of celebrating the deliverance from captivity. And it's at the very time when Jesus is delivering from captivity. And they're missing the point. The part that kind of stands out to me is where Jesus says, "Assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." And he then goes on to say, he who dips his bread, and he points out who it is. And, Judas is here having betrayed Jesus, or, made an arrangement where he's going to receive silver in exchange for the life of Jesus, and indicating who it is. And he's now at this Passover meal, and he's dipping bread with them, and Jesus is pointing out who it is, and he still is moving forward with his plan that he clearly has questions about, because he jumps up in the middle of the meal and runs out.
Felt, you know what I mean? To be like, you're just sitting here chilling, like, all right, this is about to happen, and then you hear Jesus like, oh, the person that's dipping,
he will betray me.
Well, the funny thing is,
I hope no one saw me just do that thing that everyone
it's
saw
not
me do.
even that. It's God. Jesus he even said, "Is it me, Lord?" When he went.
Yeah, is it?
And God is like, "I didn't say it. You spoke it."
You're feeling guilty.
Yeah. And that's the thing that struck me. Like right there, Jesus calls him out and tells him that you're going to be. And the funny thing is, Judah knew.
And he recognized it.
He knew. He recognized it. And it was before everyone's seen it. It was in front of all the disciples. And nobody else got it. Nobody else wondered where their other brother went when he got up and he left to go get his money, or to get the Pharisees. Nobody wondered. And then going into the next part that we see is Jesus goes out to pray, I'm going to butcher this.
Gethsemane.
It's all right. It's all right.
Gethsemane. Okay. So they go out to pray, right? And not once, but twice, Jesus comes back to them and he invites them to pray with him.
To stay awake.
To stay awake, right? To
pray
stay
with
awake.
him on his behalf. Because
On his
he's
behalf.
going through this really difficult
Exactly.
He's very stressed.
And not once, Jesus comes back and he's like, "Hey, what's up? Like,
Why
it's
are
only
you
been an
sleeping?
hour. Why are you sleeping? Stay awake. At least stay awake." He goes up to pray. He comes back. What happens? They're asleep again. It's like those signs have been there from the very beginning, from the time the woman, she did this amazing thing for him, to the time they broke bread, to the time they went up to pray. All the signs were there.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, where's the hearts of the disciples? Where's their mind at? Where's their spirit at?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just more evidence of the fact that they didn't get it.
They didn't get it.
Like if they really realized the struggle that Jesus was going through and what he was about to go through and how increasingly difficult it was going to be for him, they would have stayed up in earnest prayer on his behalf, and they would have, been trying to do more to support him and to, mediate on his behalf, to try to, pray for him and his strength during this time.
And for themselves. I mean, he directly tells them,
That you're
going
going
to
to be part
fall
of
away.
this whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to strike down the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. Like, if you understood that, you'd be like, oh, man, Lord, keep us together. Keep us by the shepherd. Please, don't let us leave the shepherd. We need the shepherd. But, yeah, they really didn't get it. It's scary.
Yeah, Jesus got it. He got that he would be separated from God, and that was horrible. I think it was a horrific feeling for him to go through, and it's hard to believe that the people didn't get it from the time of Exodus to now. They have been separated so many different times from God and taken into captivity, delivered back and forth, but they never got it. And it says here, you know, what's really happening in Gethsemane, and that's where I brought up the point that Jesus was separated from God. And it's something, if we choose Lord as our Lord and personal Savior, that we won't ever have to experience. And for me, I'll always remember that Christ experienced something that nobody else will have to experience except for those who reject him. And I can't imagine how he felt to be separated from his Father. And reading in the lesson, it said, you know, he could have walked away and said, you know, I'll let them, you know, take their own penalty for their sin, etc. But he died their death in their stead, knowing the condition of their hearts at that time. I mean, he knew no one was on his side, and they weren't going to be on his side until after. And to still go through with it, we serve a merciful Savior. It's a blessing.
I didn't know when I was doing the lesson study, I didn't realize that at the time when Jesus was praying, you know, Lord, please take this cup from me. The whole time I thought it was more about his suffering that he will be enduring from the time he's brought before the people. You know, everything that he had to go through from the time he was surrendered or betrayed. And so all this time until this lesson, I thought that when Jesus was in the garden praying, he was actually praying for, you know, what he's about to go through and not the disconnection that he would be having with God. And so I guess I just kind of want confirmation, like, did the disconnection with him not being with God happen in the Garden of Gethsemane? Or was that when there was no connection when he gave up his spirit? Remember, there was a time when
I believe it happens
before
on
he
the
gave
cross.
up.
Yeah.
So it happens on the cross.
I believe so.
Okay.
And then he says, he cries out then, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me?
Right.
And this is the moment when he's literally separated from God.
Okay. So it wasn't in the Garden of Gethsemane when he
No,
was
this
praying.
is he's anticipating it though.
Yeah.
He's anticipating it so much that he's
what's
like,
causing
if
the
there's any
anguish.
other way, Lord, if there's any other way, let's do that.
Yeah.
I'll do this, but I don't want to do this. Let's do something else.
Yeah, and he's in so much distress that his capillaries are bursting,
Yeah,
and he's
he's
sweating
bleeding,
blood,
yeah.
and he's in obvious anguish over this whole thing. But I don't think we can understand in any way, you know, as humans, what this was for him, because he's always been with God. You know, like there's been no separation. It was always from the beginning, and so for him to have that separation is complete agony and anguish to even think about. And so it's not something that we have, that we can, you know, even fathom necessarily. But you're right, you know, that's ultimately what he was really grappling with and struggling with in that Garden of Gethsemane, was not all the things that he would have to go with, which were going to be very difficult, but that separation that he knew was coming and that was going to cut him off, and he was going to be blackened, you know, was going to be blackened out with all the sin, the weight of the world, of both the past and the future sin that he was going to bear in that time.
Right.
You know?
So there's a lot of anticipation building here.
Yeah.
We're getting to a part of the story where things are really starting to ramp up. Like you can feel the tension, and here's when we cue Judas to come back in. You know what I mean? Like, here's where we now enter the betrayer, and he's going to kiss him. And let's move forward. Let's talk about the betrayal specifically. I mean, the actual act of it. Well, I guess, when do you think the act was? Does it matter? Does it matter when it is, or?
So here's my question with this. The fact that Judas betrayed him, like, was there something in Judas's life, because he walked with Christ? I mean, there was times when he would even rebuke people, right? Judas himself, while in the presence of God. So what was there like a sin in his life, or what was there that allowed Satan to creep in and take hold of him and just convince him to do the betrayal, to come through with it?
I think it's little things. Satan finds little footholds in our lives and ways that he can get a foothold. And part of it, I think that he was able to work with Judas's pride, maybe, and Judas wanted to be helping to start this revolution and move things forward in the way that they thought things should happen, and things didn't play out how they thought, that it was going to happen, and then they are all scattered, like it says in the passage. So, I don't know for sure what it is that was causing him to go down that path, and I don't think that he was ever too far down that path. I think that he couldn't come back. I think in his mind, maybe he had already made a decision. He'd been going down this road, and that was the path he'd chosen. But I think there was still doubts in his mind whether this is what he should be doing, and whether, but at some point he was so far down this road that pride took over, and, he wasn't going to turn back.
See,
He'd already made his decision.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because there was a time when he came, when they all came, the Pharisees and the soldiers came to arrest Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. There was a moment of hesitation there, because Judas came and he told the priest, he's like, I will betray him by a kiss, right? And then what happens? There's like,
he greets him.
Well, he greets him, but what does Jesus say? He says, do what you came here to do. Right. So then my question is...
There must be some hesitation there.
What was the hesitation?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
I don't doubt that Judas was wrestling, honestly, but I think
so
that...
sad. Sorry, keep going.
I think he was struggling, but at the end of the day, I think his pride took over. And something the lesson says is that, when you have something that someone else really wants, you possess tremendous power. And I think he let the power get the best of him. And then once they had what they wanted, he had nothing. And when he realized that, he turned to, suicide.
Man, it's so difficult. Looking at Judas's story to me is an enlightening of Satan's story. Mm-hmm. It's very sad, but there's a part where I just disconnect with it, where I just can't understand what they saw that made them go, yeah, I should keep going. Like, because there's a point where
There's points where they could have stopped.
where you start to
way.
understand.
Yeah.
Oh, to come up to Christ and to kiss him, and to look your God in the face and be like, I'm gonna go ahead with this. I just don't know what he possibly could have seen that was like, it's worth it. It just doesn't make any sense. It just seems so needless. It's such a waste of life to me.
Well, I think that's why, the Lord admonishes us to guard the avenues of our soul, because sometimes I think we don't know how deep we're capable of going into sin, and I think it could be scary if all the reins of mercy were let go and we were able to go full force. We might end up where Judas was.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't know what we're capable of. We think that, that would never happen to me, and I could never do that. But I know that, but for the grace of God, I'm completely capable of all the things that I see all around me, and participating in the very things that I would be so horrified at. Hearing about. So, yeah. Do you think, the passage is saying that the shepherd will be cut down and the sheep will be scattered? Do you think it was necessary for them to be scattered? Was that prophetic? Was it, how did that, we're kind of looking at different angles of freedom and free will, and whether Jesus is laying down his life, Judas is betraying Jesus. We're next we get to Peter and decisions that he encountered. Where in there? You're just mentioning how Jesus told Judas to move forward with this plan, this trajectory that he was already on. Where in there is it already, set in motion, and where is there, free will?
I have a friend who constantly describes God as just being descriptive, basically. He believes that God knows everything, and so prophecy, more or less, and in the law, everything is God just describing the nature of things and being like, this is the way it is. This is the way it's going to happen. am not choosing for this thing to be this way. You can still choose, but I know you, and this is what you're going to do.
Yeah, and that's the point. I know you. I think he knew their heart. And I think back to Pharaoh when he said, I will harden his heart. When I thought about it, I'm like, well, Pharaoh had no chance. If the Lord hardened his heart, he wouldn't be able to turn back. But it's because he knew his heart. Not that he wanted to harden his heart or that he wanted him to make that choice, but he knew.
It is a hard question, though, because we'll have Paul bringing up Pharaoh as a vessel of wrath and saying that the potter has the right to create vessels to take his wrath out on. Just like he has the right to create vessels to put his honor on. And the vessel say to the potter, why have you made me? Which I think the vessel should be able to say that, but that's my personal
I don't know.
opinion.
I think you guys are going very deep with this.
It's true, it's true. It's
When I think about what you said, the first thing that came to my mind was the fact that sheep need a shepherd, right? It's not because sheep are stupid. They just like guidance. They want somebody to be there to guide and whatever. They in flocks and herds, whatever you have, packs, there's always a leader. There's always a pack leader. There's always somebody that the rest of the pack, the rest of the herd, not herb, looks for. And so I think about when Jesus was cut down. Here's this guy, God and a friend and buddy and everything that he was to them is suddenly cut down. And they're all just like, well, what happens now? What are we supposed to do? And out of fear, I think that's why Peter fell into denial. And because there was nobody there, that symbol that they looked at as a shepherd to guide them, to lead them, was cut down. And then now they're just like lost sheep. They don't know where to go. They don't know, who to look to. Nobody was there to really take the next step after Jesus. Now, grant you, after Christ, was ascended into heaven, then they understood what it was all about. Then there was leaders. Then there was, Peter stood up, and then later Paul came into the picture. Then there was leaders that rose up, that people looked to for guidance, for counsel. And now you have the shepherd who's been cut down, taken away, and then you have these like small little sheep. They don't know what to do with themselves. They don't know where to go, who to turn to, how to even react when they're being confronted about, well, Jesus. Oh, no, I don't. Because they don't know what's going to happen to him.
I don't know the man.
I don't know the man.
But I just find it very distressing to see Jesus spending all his time with these 12 individuals and impressing upon them what his purpose of being here on the earth is, exactly laying out to them what is going to happen, what trials they're going to face, be prepared, spend time in prayer. And when it comes, it completely blindsides them. They're not prepared. They don't know what to do. He's disappeared. He's arrested, and they're going in every direction and denying any relationship to him and in complete confusion. And it wasn't until he rose from the grave and they were able to see, and he was laid out for them, even more clearly what they were then to do, that they finally got it and started moving forward in the church was established and grew.
Well, I like to think of it, taking my life. I grew up in the church. Granted, I didn't grow up Adventist, but I still grew up knowing who Christ was. And despite knowing what I knew about God, I still took the wrong direction. Once I got to that age where I can do things on my own, I walked away from God, I walked away from church, and I went into the world and I sinned, and I did things that my parents would not approve of. But why? It's the same concept with them. They knew, they were taught, all of that was in front of them, like you said, but yet something made them pull away, something still made them fall back, fall short of the glory of God. But it was still that one thing that brought them back.
And that's the important thing. That one thing that brought them back. The Spirit is really what we'll see. And even the things that they knew of Christ, because they confess him as Christ, and Christ will say, "Flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you. The Spirit revealed this to you." So the one thing they knew about him, they only knew because the Spirit told them. And we'll see the same thing happen with the church as the story goes on, because he'll die and then he'll be resurrected, and they still won't really get it. They'll say, and he'll be meeting with them and showing them stuff, and they'll be learning. But at the end, he'll say, "I'm going to go away, and I'm going to send you my Spirit."
Yeah.
And then they get it, and they go, "Well, let's just wait for his Spirit then."
Yeah.
And they just sit in a room and wait for his Spirit to come, and it comes, and thus starts the Christian church.
Yeah.
we're getting ahead of ourselves. Peter's denial. Let's move to Peter.
This is a really interesting contrast, I think, because we see Peter in the garden, and then we see Peter on the terrace by the fire. And on the one hand, he's at Jesus' side. He brandishes his sword, and he's ready to fight and defend. And the next, he's cowering and not acknowledging that he has any relationship to Jesus. What do you think made the difference between his reaction in the garden and his reaction on the terrace? I mean, why is there such a contrast?
Something I liked from the lesson that the lesson brought out was we always tend to think that Peter denied Jesus because he was afraid. That's the first thing we think of. But I like some of the different scenarios it gave for maybe reasons why Peter denied Christ. It said like maybe he thought that Christ had given up, or he really didn't understand what Christ was doing, and so he was confused. Not necessarily that it was a deep-rooted fear that he had. But just going back to, oh, go ahead.
Do you think he was confused or he was a coward? Because I think there's a difference.
No, I think there was a level of confusion. I think that when he cut that ear off the man, he thought that this was going to play out very differently than how it happened. Yeah. So when Christ got arrested, I think he was like, whoa, what just happened? Like, you need to establish your kingdom, let's, kill them all, whatever you were going to do. But I think there was a level of confusion. And something that really stood out, I'm going to say it again, is that he thought Jesus had given up. And I think as a result, he gave up, and, the rest of the disciples gave up. But yeah.
I think his reaction by the fire, in the night was very fear-based. Yes, he may be confused, and he doesn't know why things are playing out how they are because he's expecting something totally different. But, he's hiding behind, hiding his association with Jesus or, being with him or knowing anything about him. And he's kind of giving into the peer pressure of those around him, that are jeering at, and mocking this whole scenario that's playing out. And he said, yeah, I don't know anything about it. I don't know him. And to me, that's fear-based.
Well, obviously it's a spiritual problem, and obviously there are a lot of spiritual problems, so many so that we didn't even get to all of them. But I want to thank you guys for joining me on what we did get through, and I want to thank you guys for joining us. There's still a lot left to read, but you can keep studying and you can keep watching.